Hello everyone and welcome to the Sidereal Insights Astro Update for July 1st, 2019. I'm Phaedra. I'm the astrologer and artist of Mystic Physick Astrology, and I use Western Sidereal astrology here in my practice to help you kind of reconnect with your soul purpose and remember why you came to begin with. My aim with this broadcast is really to help provide guidance on how you can consciously use the energy of the transiting planets to affect your life in a positive way. And so if you need to look up your sidereal sign placements, there's an easy online calculator that you can use at mystickphysick.com/sidereal tools. And if you'll give me just one moment, I'm going to share that and let me refresh my browser here. I'm going to share that in the comments to the live broadcast for anyone who might be joining us live who doesn't have that information. We're going to be talking about some specific degrees today in your sidereal natal chart, and it'll be helpful to know where you can find those degrees, whether you have any planets or personal points at or aspecting those degrees, and it'll help to know your sidereal sun and rising sign. So bear with me just one moment. I've got the broadcast pulled up. Let's see here. I'm going to mute the browser so that you don't have to hear me twice. Here we go. So here is the link for the calculator. Maybe. Oh, there it is. Except I pasted it twice. There you go. So welcome to the broadcast. It's good to have you with me. I see some folks are joining us live. So if you have questions as we go through today's broadcast, please feel free to pop them in the comments below. We have kind of a lot to cover because we have a lot going on. But thank you for joining me. Please like and share this broadcast. You can feel free to tag a friend if you know someone who might be interested in what we're covering today. And you can also follow Mystic Physick Astrology on Facebook, and be sure also to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and that way you don't ever miss a broadcast. Today what we're talking about are, we're kind of recapping where we're at with the current transits, especially the retrogrades. There's a lot of retrograde activity going on right now and coming up. We're going to be talking about the new moon solar eclipse in Gemini, which is tomorrow. And we're also going to be talking about Mercury's retrograde in Cancer. Mercury's going to kind of have an extended stay in Cancer, and I want to talk about how we can use that, particularly in light of the fact that Mercury rules our new moon solar eclipse. And so there's a dynamic going on that we can really tap into from the right perspective and with the right approach. So kind of diving in real quick to recap where we're at right now. So we've got Jupiter retrograde in Scorpio, Saturn retrograde, and Pluto retrograde in Sagittarius. Those have been going on for some time. A couple of them since April. So for several months now, we've been experiencing that retrograde activity. We had Neptune recently retrograde in Sidereal Aquarius. That just happened June 21st. We have Mercury stationing retrograde July 7th. So he's already in his retrograde shadow, retrograding in Sidereal Cancer, except for a brief window where he'll backtrack into Gemini for about 10 days from July 27th through August 5th. But we'll have Mercury stationing retrograde July 7th, and he'll be retrograde through the end of the month. So cool your jets. Okay, slow down, take a breather. It's okay. If it feels like you're not making a lot of progress, or if it feels like we're moving backwards in a lot of areas of life, that's why. Progress is going to be slow. Especially in the houses these planets are transiting right now, and in the areas of life that they rule in your sidereal natal chart. So you'll want to be cognizant of, where do you have Aquarius, where do you have Sagittarius, where do you have Scorpio, where do you have Cancer in your natal chart, because these are the houses that are going to be affected as well. But let's talk about how we can use the retrograde activity, because retrogrades really can be beneficial times if we understand the opportunities that they're presenting to us. A couple of these we've talked about before over the last several broadcasts, because we have had retrograde activity going on for several months now. Jupiter retrograde is it's kind of a second chance. It's an opportunity for a do-over, which is really beneficial in a lot of ways. So looking to where you have Scorpio in your sidereal natal chart, and looking to where you have Sagittarius, which is the house that Jupiter rules naturally. These are areas where you have opportunities for a do-over during Jupiter's retrograde. Saturn's retrograde is an opportunity to address an unmet commitment or an outstanding obligation that you have. Pluto's retrograde is a little bit deeper. This is an opportunity for some inner healing and transformation. And then Neptune in retrograde typically reveals things that have previously been hidden or kept secret. So you watch for revelations to come between now and late November, especially in the houses ruled by Pisces and Aquarius in your sidereal, in your sidereal natal chart, because that's where we're going to be feeling Neptune's retrograde the most. But you can use Neptune's retrograde to kind of reconnect with spirit, reconnect with divine guidance, reconnect with your inner self. And you can use it for digging into your unconscious beliefs and hidden motivations. Are these beliefs serving you? That's a good question always to ask. What hidden motivations are you uncovering, and what can you learn from them? What insight can you gain that can guide your actions going forward? And then finally, with Mercury's retrograde coming up, be thinking about your plans for this retrograde. Break out your Mercury retrograde survival guides. Have a look at what houses Gemini and Cancer are in your sidereal natal chart, and consult the guide for suggestions on how you can ride the retrograde constructively in those two houses. Okay, and then lastly, in terms of current activity, it's eclipse season. Eclipses are here. So we're just now in July, moving into the third set of eclipses in the Gemini Sagittarius series, which is going to be culminating in July of next year. Some of you may receive eclipse news in the last week of June and the first week of July, especially if you have a planet or personal point at or near 15 or 16 degrees of an air or fire sign. Those are the folks who are going to be particularly affected by tomorrow's eclipse. So watch for that, and then also watch for continuing news, more news that might come to light going forward as we progress further into this eclipse series. We'll be feeling the July eclipses all the way into the early part of September, some of us. So we still have a couple of months for the summer eclipses to play out. We have more in this series coming up in December and more even into next year. So watch for that, and watch for that additional news to come up, because what will happen is, as we move further into this cycle, those of us who are going to be personally affected by the Gemini Sagittarius series will move further into and through the process of change that these eclipses are triggering for us. Okay, so if you haven't, I want to point you in the direction of the video that we recorded earlier this year on the July 2019 eclipses, critical dates and degrees. That's going to give you more information. It'll tell you how specifically you can look at your own sidereal natal chart to determine whether or not you're personally going to be affected, and what dates you'll want to keep your eye on through early September. Okay. To kind of backtrack a little bit to the conversation that began in early June, one of the things that I mentioned in the June overview and short reports, that individually and collectively we're feeling kind of the cumulative influence of all of these planetary retrogrades and the eclipses in Gemini and Sagittarius. And all of that, what it does is it combines to create this state of flux, this state of uncertainty. And so that's really what we're navigating right now. And while we're in this condition of flux and uncertainty, it's not a good time to force things. It's not a good time to be making decisions, especially not ones that could potentially be permanent or that could have long-term effects on your life and on outcomes. So slow down. Anywhere where you might be experiencing obstacles or coming up against slowdowns or roadblocks or uncertainty, it's best to kind of meet those matters with an open mind and a receptive attitude towards what are the possible solutions for moving forward? What are alternative ways to move forward? You want to try to refrain as much as possible from getting attached to a particular idea about the way things ought to be, or how they should proceed, and don't attempt to impose your will. It's really risky to do that, especially under these circumstances, and that could lead to disappointment down the road. So be careful about that. Instead, what I would advise you to do is to take your time to observe, really understand what is going on for you right now, get clear about what you actually want from the future, and explore what's the gap between those two things, and what is the lesson in that gap. What can you learn from? What can you take away? from that kind of an examination, and use that to inform your decisions and your actions going forward, giving the eclipses a little bit of time to play out so you know what news they have in store for you, what news they can potentially bring you. You may be noticing a great deal of tension in the houses that the July eclipses activate. This is totally normal. The tension will mostly be over by the end of August and early September, after these two eclipses have had the opportunity to run their course. And that's really the most important thing, is giving these eclipses some breathing space to communicate to you what change they're going to bring if you're going to be directly affected by them. And that will help give you a better understanding of how to move forward once they've passed. Okay, but definitely check out the video that I just dropped a link to. And if you're not familiar with how eclipses can operate in our lives, I have another link for you here. I just didn't paste it in a way that was easy to copy. So hold on, I'm going to give you a link to this too. So this is my video on 3 important eclipse essentials you need to know. And it just kind of goes into eclipses in general. What you need to know to navigate them, how to move through them, how you can work with eclipse energy. And so if you haven't watched that, or if you haven't watched it in a while and you just want a refresher, there's a link, and that'll get you kind of up to speed on what you can expect coming through eclipse season. Okay. So where are we at transit-wise? Right now we have the sun in Sidereal Gemini, of course. The sun moved into Gemini on June 16th. It's a 4-week transit of the sun moving through any individual sign. It's going to focus the spotlight really on the flow of information, on the flow of communication, on exchanges, interactions, and dialogues between people, the flow of goods and services, and knowledge. That trend will continue through mid-month. We have Mercury right now in Cancer. Mercury moved into Cancer on June 21st. This is going to be a 9.5 week long transit, which is a really long time to host Mercury in a sign, and it's because of his retrograde. This is the 2nd Mercury retrograde of the year. It's a much longer transit. He normally takes about 3 weeks, 2.5 to 3 weeks to transit a sign. Now, keeping in mind, we will have that brief window of about 10 days at the end of this month and the beginning of next month where Mercury will be backtracking into Sidereal Gemini. So there will be a small interruption. Hey, Danielle, it's good to see you on the broadcast. So with this Mercury retrograde, if you have Cancer Sun or Cancer Rising, pay attention, take note. Mercury's long tour of your sign is likely going to affect you more than it may affect other people, even though we all tend to feel Mercury retrograde in some way or another. You may be particularly affected if you have Cancer Sun or Cancer Rising. With this particular Mercury retrograde, well, first of all, if you need a refresher on Mercury retrograde, go look up your Mercury retrograde survival guide, or go check out the blog post at mystickphysick.com on Mercury retrograde that goes into what it's about, what you need to know to prepare, what to do, what not to do if you have choices about what types of activities you take on during the Mercury retrograde. It's going to give you that information. It's going to arm you with some contingency plans for when you don't have the option to delay certain activities. So definitely check out that guide. Let me see if I can get, I have a link here, but I'm not sure if it's to the blog post or if it's to the full guide, which is actually one that you can buy. It looks like this is to the blog post. I hope. I'll give you the link. If not, the blog post will link you to the downloadable guide. There's a free version, and then there's expanded version that you can buy. If you want the expanded version, I go into much more detail about how you can intentionally use Mercury's retrogrades depending on what house they're falling in for you by your sidereal natal chart. So Mercury retrograde in Cancer can bring up ideas and issues around mother and motherhood, right? Can bring up issues around nurturing, around emotional connection and emotional security, ideas around family, clan, home, and what that means at its core. Okay, this is potentially an emotional retrograde, and because Mercury rules tomorrow's eclipse, it's potentially an emotional eclipse as well. What this means, though, is that we have an opportunity to kind of really analyze and intellectualize our emotional responses. and understand our emotional responses through a lens of logic. And that can be beneficial in trying to kind of sort out what we need, right? So this is an opportunity to communicate our feelings, hopefully without being sucked into them, right? And overwhelmed by them. And also to perhaps reconcile with a mother figure, reconcile with family, reconcile with issues around home, healing the mother wound for those of us who may be dealing with mother wounds in our lives. And it's also really a time to kind of stop and consider, are your needs being met? With Cancer, these are often core emotional needs, which make us feel secure and make us feel nurtured, right? So look at the house that Cancer occupies in your sidereal natal chart and consider whether you have unmet needs in this area, okay? And then also look to any planets that you might have in Cancer and consider how having your needs met in Cancer, in your Cancer house, could help you find greater fulfillment in the house or houses ruled by other planets that you have in Cancer, okay? And then finally, I would encourage you to look to your moon placement and consider whether getting your needs met in that area of your life could help you feel more secure and more nurtured in your Cancer house, okay? Because wherever we have planets not in their home sign, there's a dynamic going on between that house and the house the planets are deposited in. And with this eclipse and with the retrograde at the same time, with this back and forth Mercury conjunct Mars activity that the retrograde is bringing us, this is really an opportunity to tap into the message that Mercury is bringing us, the message, the stories that we're telling about our lives, and issues around nurturance and emotional fulfillment. Okay, so big opportunity here. I would encourage you to take advantage of it. We have Mars in Cancer too, as I was saying. Mars moved into Cancer June 23rd. And that really kind of galvanizes activity in that part of your chart, especially around domestic matters, which are naturally ruled by Cancer. And this will last until early September. We have typically Mars in a sign for about 6 to 7 weeks. And so if you have plans to use Mercury's retrograde in Cancer in alignment with your natal blueprint, then Mars's presence there is really going to help give you the drive that you need to make the most of it all the way through that transit. So plan, though, to include regular periods of rest, because that lunar influence of Cancer on Mars can make our energy levels really kind of fluctuate more frequently. Okay, so be sure to be cognizant of how much energy you're expending and how much time you're taking to rest to kind of recharge that energy. But definitely take advantage, because Mars is going to kind of give you a boost in terms of being able to get through what you want to and need to get through during the transits of Cancer. Okay, and then we also have Venus in Gemini. Venus just moved into Gemini, joining the Sun there. That's about a 3.5 week long transit as well. And so for those of you who have Gemini Sun or Gemini Rising, you have the opportunity to really tap into Venus's presence in Gemini in your home sign in the days just after this particular new moon solar eclipse. And so it's kind of an exciting time. It's kind of a turbulent time for a lot of folks. July really arrives full of changes. There's a lot of lunar activity this month. We have 3 lunations in July. Which is kind of, and really kind of a rare combination of events. So we have a pair of new moons. The month is bookended by new moons, right? Opening and closing the month. We have a second full moon in Sagittarius about halfway through July. Remember, we just had a full moon in Sagittarius in June. This month, we're going to have a lunar eclipse in Sagittarius on the 16th. And all of this while mischievous little Mercury is doing his tap dance retrograde, okay? So right now, what we're really finding is that we're really immersed in this period, this season of change and transition. And it's a period which can really affect our thinking and our beliefs. It can bring opportunities to travel, potentially near or far. It could put us in touch with other people, whether that's family or colleagues or friends, old family, old colleagues, new colleagues, right? The July eclipses on the 2nd and the 16th activate that Gemini-Sagittarius axis, and that's going to influence mental activity. It's going to highlight travel-related themes in the world at large, but especially for those of us who are directly affected. And the other thing to keep in mind is we have Uranus squaring Mercury at this particular new moon, and so we can also see potentially some unexpected news come up, unexpected opportunities to travel or disruptions to travel, or insights, sudden insights may come to us when we have Uranus involved with Mercury, okay? The new moon solar eclipse in Gemini, let's talk about this a little bit more in depth for a moment. This occurs at 15 degrees 37 minutes by the Fagan-Bradley Sidereal Zodiac. It's going to affect readers with a planet or point at 15 or 16 degrees of an air or fire sign. So this is Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius are the air signs. Aries, Leo, Sagittarius are our fire signs. Those are the folks who are going to be affected most strongly of all, okay? We'll feel the effects through Gemini-ruled themes and areas of life. So sudden changes to travel plans or unexpected news or visits from siblings or extended family. These are some ways that we can experience this. What I want you to remember, though, is that eclipses expose secrets and hidden things. They bring change, they bring new beginnings, and they bring endings, and it's permanent change typically. This can be when people that we know leave our lives for good, or new people come into our lives on a permanent, ongoing basis. The change that eclipses bring is typically permanent. Now, we have some retrograde activity going on right now, and so that can have an effect on whether or not the change truly is permanent, or whether there's opportunities for things to come back around later on down the road. But typically eclipse change is permanent, and it often forces us to move on from something that we've been holding on to for longer than necessary. It's often change that we've been resisting in some way. So keep that in mind. Eclipses are really powerful lunations. They're far stronger than a typical new or full moon, and they bring upheaval and change where stagnation has kind of settled in. And so they're not necessarily fun or comfortable all the time, but what they bring is usually beneficial in the long run once we've made it through, right? Eclipses in Gemini can be erratic, okay? They can affect our thinking on our mind. They can affect writing and writers. They can affect communications and communication equipment. They can affect travel and transportation. Gemini eclipses can be really intensely insightful, okay? But one thing you want to do is avoid taking people at their word during a Gemini eclipse. Disregard any promises that have been made to you in the days and weeks around this particular new moon, okay? You want to keep your schedule free and open as much as possible, and that'll allow you to react better to any unexpected changes that are bound to come up at this time. If you're traveling, keep room in your itinerary for delays, for reschedules, for detours. And then with all eclipses, avoid issuing ultimatums, because they tend to backfire, okay? And they tend to backfire badly. So no ultimatums at eclipse time. Keep that in mind. This particular solar eclipse, this new moon, can present to us choices that we maybe haven't considered, okay? Also, any impulsive decision now could have really unpredictable results. So keep that in mind and try not to be impulsive in your decision making. In fact, if you can hold off making important decisions until after the eclipse has run its course, that's really the best mode of action. If you can do that, you want to leave a lot of room for the situation to change and for new information to come to light before committing to a course of action, because that information that you don't have that may be coming to you could influence the decision or the course of action you would have taken. And you don't want to come up against needing to adjust and not be in a position to be able to adjust. And then I would also encourage you to expect the pace of communication to pick up right now, even though the risk of miscommunication is on the rise because of the coming Mercury retrograde, okay? So July 7th, the Mercury is going to station retrograde. This is a time you're going to want to double and triple check every form, every communication, every memo, every email that you send. Look for typos, look for autocorrect mistakes. Errors could lead to otherwise preventable disruptions, and you'd rather not have to deal with that right now. So double and triple check yourself. You might be encountering delays or obstacles, roadblocks that arise out of the blue, communication breakdowns, a little bit of ingenuity and out-of-the-box thinking can actually really kind of help move through these issues if they come up for you, so keep that in mind. But take care not to get derailed by conflict right now. Because this is a potentially emotional new moon, it can provide, like I was saying earlier, the right environment for an important conversation, which accounts for the feelings of all the parties involved, can allow us to air pent-up emotions and finally express them. But there's a real risk of being derailed by conflict with Mars in the mix. So be careful about that, because patience may be harder to come by. And all stakeholders that are involved deserve the same opportunity to be heard. Okay, so just take extra care to keep communication open, keep it respectful, keep it on topic, so that we can avoid falling into defensiveness and division. And really, it's important to remember that when we look at things through the lens of us versus them, or you versus me, everyone loses out. When you do that, you've already made it about who's right and who's wrong. And when you're coming into any kind of dialogue or interplay between people with a you versus me or us versus them mentality, or with a needing to be right or to make yourself right and the other person wrong, we've already lost when that's the approach. Okay, so just be careful of that. Try to leave that on the table and not bring it with you. And then finally, I want you to consider, what's the story that you're telling? This is big with the new moon. What's the story you're telling about your life, about your situation, about what's going on for you right now? Get clear about what that story is that you've been telling, and then use Mercury's upcoming retrograde through the month of July as an opportunity to tell a new story. Write a new story, one that serves you better, one that moves you further into what it is you want out of life and what you want to manifest, and one that helps you bring resolution to areas where you may have ongoing issues that are not yet resolved. Okay? And then towards mid-month, we have a full moon lunar eclipse in Sagittarius. And we'll talk a little bit about this. We're going to talk about this again next time. But with the full moon in Sagittarius, this stalling tactics might be a good idea to engage in right now. Not only at the full moon, but also now at the new moon, because of Mercury's slow down into the retrograde, right? Stalling tactics, especially if you need to make an important decision or set a significant course of action, you want to buy yourself time for whatever it is you need to know to come to light. Remember, eclipses reveal things. We talked about that a little bit earlier. The full moon in Sagittarius this month is going to bring new challenges. It's kind of an awkward sort of second chance to move through anything that may not have worked out the way you hoped at last month's full moon. But just a week ahead of the July 16th eclipse, we have a Mars-Uranus square that could touch off something unexpected, okay? Emotions may be volatile in that week ahead of the mid-month eclipse. Events could be really disruptive, and that could touch off a flurry of really unexpected activity, or even it could touch off aggression in people. Compounding that, the Mercury retrograde kicks in right at the same time as that Mars-Uranus square. And so navigating that retrograde and the eclipse at the same time could prove challenging for a lot of people. The small blessing here is that the July eclipse offers, like I was saying, an encore opportunity to try again and get things right that clearly weren't working last month at the full moon. Okay. One thing to note with Mercury retrograde at the full moon in the middle of July, if you choose to use this full moon to finish something important, which is typically what we use full moons for, that's when things come to a conclusion or come to an ending, we're finalizing things, right? It's time, that's the harvest time, right? If you choose to use this full moon to finish something, you may have to go back later and make corrections, okay? If that poses no real difficulty for your particular situation, or if you have Mercury retrograde in your natal chart, then that may be of less concern for you. Okay? But just know that whatever comes to a conclusion or comes to fruition at mid-July may have to be kind of tweaked later. You may have to go back and revisit and see if it doesn't need some changes. Okay? And that particular full moon in mid-July can also be used as an opportunity to go back to something that you thought was finished already, right? And make improvements, or to pick up the threads of something that appeared to be over and done with and continue it, okay? Just not exactly right where you left off, right? Either case, the future version will be changed or different in some way, okay? If something were to come to an end with the full moon in mid-July, I would say it may not be a permanent ending, which we would normally expect with a lunar eclipse, that it would be a permanent ending. Mercury's retrograde suggests that there's a chance for future reconciliation, repair, or renewal. Plus, we have, right now, we have Jupiter retrograde, although that will be coming to a close soon enough. Jupiter will be ruling the eclipse that we have at mid-month, the full moon lunar eclipse. So keep that in mind as well. And if you're directly affected by that eclipse, you'll want to keep an eye out on the critical dates that I go over in the blog post, the July eclipse blog post. And if you're not sure if you're directly affected, watch the video, because I'll walk you through how to find out in the video that goes with that blog post. And that's really what I have for you today. The July overview and short reports will be up on the website soon. If you want to be notified by email as soon as that goes up, be sure and sign up for the Mystick Physick, the newsletter on the website. You'll want the newsletter. That's where I let you know when the horoscopes have been posted. And then join me tonight. We're going to have our guided new moon intention setting practice for the new moon solar eclipse in Gemini tonight. It's a perfect time to generate ideas, to reach for clarity, to make a powerful and meaningful start to a fresh new story, the fresh new story of you, right? We'll be having that in the Sidereal Insights astrology community here on Facebook. You do need to be part of the community to join us live. That'll be at 7:30 p.m. Mountain Time, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. What time is that? I think it's like early in the morning if you're in British Standard Time. And it's tomorrow sometime for those of you who are catching us from Australia. I'll post the times for that later on when I post a reminder that we're having that broadcast tonight. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also make sure to hit the notification icon when you do, so that you don't ever miss a broadcast. They always go up on the YouTube channel afterwards, and that way, even if I don't send you an email that we have a broadcast coming up, you'll get notified as soon as it gets posted to the YouTube channel. And please follow us on Facebook, and be sure to like and share this broadcast. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again. Well, I normally would say next time, but we'll see you again later this evening for the new moon intention setting. Thanks so much.